Your eyes and your vision are under attack. Damaging blue light from the sun, your phone, your computer, your tablet, even light bulbs and car headlights is constantly bombarding you. The good news is our eyes actually already have a line of defense to counter the effects of blue light. This defense is made up of 3 pigments called carotenoids. MacuHealth with Micromycel, the only supplement with the exclusive patent on all 3 macular carotenoids and Micromycel technology.
With more screen usage and indoor time, myopia, also known as nearsightedness, is increasing and getting worse in children. Now, certified eye doctors can prescribe MySight One Day, the first and only FDA-approved soft contact lens to slow myopia progression in age-appropriate children. Visit CooperVision.com to find a Brilliant Futures certified eye doctor near you. Welcome back to part 3 of my interview with Dr. John Nolan. In this episode, Dr. Nolan continues his top 10 most important clinical nutritional trials. If you're new here and you like our interviews, press like, subscribe, share, and hit the bell. Also, please leave comments. Be sure to watch our full-length documentary, Open Your Eyes, on Amazon Prime, Apple TV, iTunes, Google Play, and YouTube Movies and Shows. So let's go to the next study, which is the ARADS-2 study. What can we learn from that study that's positive, and how can it help us?
The ARADS-2 study was really a good piece of work, because the ARADS-2 study demonstrated that antioxidant intervention has a benefit. And remember, we spoke about morphology and affecting disease. But the ARADS-2 study was very limited in terms of its measures, outcome measures, in my view. The ARADS-2 studies did not measure visual function. So again, it measured acuity, best corrected acuity, but there's no other measures of vision. ARADS-2 study, I have it there as an important study though, because even with all its weaknesses, in my view, in terms of its study design, remember, there was no true placebo control group. It demonstrated that the addition of the carotenoids added a significant benefit to people that were benefiting from carotenoid intervention. So what does that mean? Well, if you just take the general sample, the secondary analysis shows that there was an additional 10% benefit. But where I think the real value in the ARADS-2 study came was that when you take people with the very low quintile of dietary performance, they had over 30% improvement and in risk reduction when the carotenoids were added. I would have liked to see the 3 carotenoids, mesozeaxanthin there. I would have liked to see other measures of visual function. But I actually think, remarkably, even with all the limitations of the study design, it actually really validates what we've been saying for many, many years, if you just look closely at the data. And it also shows you the value of looking at the totality of the data, even within a study. The ARADS-2 study rightly showed that the primary outcome measure didn't achieve its target endpoint. So it was published as a failed experiment. But the secondary analysis study, when we focus in on what carotenoids did to that population, one of the problems, Kerry, 2 main ones. One, it wasn't a representative sample because everyone is already on high dose. So if you looked at carotenoid scores, it wasn't representative of the American population. They'd all been supplemented for a long period of time. And the second thing is there's no true placebo, because standard of care was given as having some of the basic ARADS formula. So there was no real true placebo control in that experiment. But nonetheless, I think it was an ultimate validation of the use of carotenoids. Of course, they removed beta carotene. They didn't find the value in omega-3 fatty acids. I believe that maybe the omegas that they used were not the optimal type of omegas. There's a lot, omega-3 scientists will comment more on that than me. But from a carotenoid macular pigment perspective, I was truly happy to see the outcomes of what we had.
And I'm going to have an omega scientist on the show to go over that as well. The next study is when they looked at different formulations of carotenoids. There was the MacuHealth formulation, which I guess you call MacuShield in Europe.
Was this the most? Was this the most experiment? Is that what we're on now? What's the title? Sustained supplementation.
Yeah, yes.
Thank you. Yeah. So this experiment I have here, because although it was a single blind trial, which means that although the participants didn't know what they were on, the researchers did, so full validation of that. This showed us two major things. As part of the MOST experiment, this was part of the work where we demonstrated that you needed meso to ensure that everyone got a response. That's where you could fill those central dips. But also it tells the eye doctor, the optometrist, that if you want to be successful with a carotenoid intervention, don't expect success to happen in 2 months or 3 or even 6 months. And this is why, again, to go back to the recent publication in Nutrients where they claimed all these things at 6 months, which are bizarre. You know, A, they didn't have all the carotenoids, but B, you know, it wasn't long enough of an intervention to test the theory. The MOST study, we followed these patients for 3 years, 36 months. And we had better results, Kerry, at 36 months than we did at 24 months. So the longer you do this in a very safe and controlled way, the better the outcome. This is a lifestyle change. This is not just something that happens overnight, okay? And the other piece, major thing, and why I believe this experiment gets there was the endurance of the experiment to follow these people for that period of time and to carefully track their bloods, track their eye measurements, track contrast sensitivity. And this was the first time where we really saw that with AMD, with a population group of AMD, that those that are given the triple carotenoid intervention, instead of them losing their contrast sensitivity, we can improve it. And remember, and I've spoken on your show before about the importance of contrast sensitivity. It's the one measure of visual function that correlates really well with how the patient feels about his or her vision. So it matters to the patient. And when we talk about clinical importance and clinical significance, being able to change that, this was another moment for me, Kerry, when I saw those contrast sensitivity charts in the active group. And particularly when, as you said at the outset here, when meso was there, we were changing the normal events of visual function in patients that were suffering with a disease. Now, these were early stage AMD. They hadn't advanced stage AMD, they had an early stage.
Now, in this study, the group that had the meso did the best. Did it just do the best in contrast, or did it do the best in other visual functions as well?
It did the best in macular pigment in the first. So the first piece you need to resolve and satisfy is the whole objective of the exercise is can you enhance the macular pigment?
And that was within 3 months, right?
It started in 3 months, but as I said, the message from this is you really see an effect 6, 12 months, 24 months. And it's a lifestyle change. The longer you do it, the better the outcome. The other measures were glare disability. We looked at photostress recovery, and we saw contrast sensitivity in those environments as well. Myopic contrast sensitivity were greatly improved. So there was a whole battery of visual function tests that got better. And we needed to do the right type of assessment. We needed the right techniques to assess these patients. Were they sensitive enough to the vision that we were looking at?
And what group was it? There were 3, right? There was the ultra lutein, and there was another formula.
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely.
Which one did second best? Which one did the worst in this particular study? So
in terms of fixing macular pigment, the triple carotenoid got that central lift and that enrichment across the entire profile. So
that one did the best.
That one did the best. Number 2 was we had a 17 milligrams of mesozeaxanthin intervention.
And that was alone, meso alone?
No, it had meso. It also had, you always have the other carotenoids. To my earlier point, they come from the plant, so you're going to have amounts of them. But we thought that we wanted to see in that experiment with if we up the meso dose, were you going to get an even better result than the 10-10-2? And the answer was you were not. The 10-10-2 gave the optimal amount, the optimal dose. What we will say is that the lutein intervention, which had 20 milligrams of lutein, so we compared like with like in terms of total activity, did nothing like what we were able to achieve when we had the 3 carotenoids present in terms of macular pigment or visual functions.
So the lutein alone did the worst.
Yes.
The 3. Now,
concentrated lutein, yeah.
So this brings me to a study that you did where you measure different companies, what was in the pill, what they said was in the pill. And if you could discuss that at this point, I found that fascinating, because people go and to these big box stores, or they go to the pharmacy and they think they're buying something, but actually what says is in the pill is not really in the pill many
Yes.
times. Not always, of course, but many times.
Well,
That was disappointing to see.
70% of commercially available supplements that we've tested over 100 now, 70% of them fail their label claim, which means that they do not have in the capsule what they say on the label. And what we see very clearly is that supplements that are cheaply formulated into powders, for example, will oxidize so quickly. There was one product we looked at produced from Canada, and basically it was in a powder, and at 28 days, Kerry, it had zero activity of carotenoid from the time we opened the capsule. So the patients that were purchasing that had no act. The reason for that is carotenoids oxidize. The reason why Macular is so stable is that it's formulated in a way that it's in a soft gel, so it's in an oil, and oil will inhibit. And I have data now on Macular and other carotenoids, other supplements, that's nearly 5 years old, and it has the exact same activity, and that's great. Okay, so yeah, it makes sense. If you purify carotenoids from marigolds, you break them from their palmitates, which are the esters that normally keep them stable, they're going to be oxidized. So oxygen and light will oxidize them. So that's really, and look, you're doing a good service to your listeners to make this point, because, you know, sometimes we all get worried, understandably. It's costly to maybe take a supplement consistently. But if you're worried about macular degeneration, or you want to optimize your vision, I think it's a small price to pay. And I don't even know how much it costs, to be honest, but relatively speaking, it's a small price to pay to try and get that, what we know you will get in terms of taking that supplement, particularly if you're at risk of macular degeneration. It's really, it's really great, you know, to be able to do that.
Well, I could tell you as a doctor who sees patients that have macular degeneration who've lost vision, that they'll pay anything to get their vision back.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, ultimately waiting until the eye is so sick that you have to get injections that cost $3,000 an injection 10 times a year is not the solution either, right? So targeted safe intervention with, and, you know, I think that's what's going to happen in the eye carotenoid industry. I hope it does. Is that the quality of the supplement, you know, my organization, full disclosure, we have this service which we provide called Supplement Certified, and we've tested many commercially available supplements. So companies kind of work with we're now actually going to be university next month. It's going to be named the SETU, Southeast Technological University. That'll be a big announcement. But as part of that, we have Supplement Certified, and MacuHealth are one example of a company that have become a member of that service, where every lot that they produce gets sent at production stage and all the way through the life of the product, and they monitor every step along the way to validate and make sure that the carotenoids are stable and delivering on their promise of claim. And I think that's essential.
Give me the name of some other brands that you tested that was in what it said it was.
So there's another brand from Germany. I think they're called Maculux. They're a German company. We use those. I'm trying to think of some of the others. We use a product called Memory Health as well that we've tested. There's another. And
these all had what they said was in the.
They all had what they said.
Yeah.
They all had what they said. And that's one part of the validation, stability and quality. And then the second question to ask is what we've been talking about tonight. You know, is there stability and efficacy? So do they work? Do they work over time? So just because it's stable, you know, then we have to draw knowledge from the value of having the 3 carotenoids, having lutein, zeaxanthin, and meso there. You know, so that's the 2 pieces of information that your doctors that are interested in knowing how to do the right thing should really look towards.
So let's go on to the next study as we go down to count down to number 1, I guess. So this is one with the head-to-head randomized clinical trials, supplement antioxidants on visual function in non-advanced age-related macular degeneration. So if you could talk about that study.
So the CREST study. So you mentioned the earlier and about, you know, what was the supplement. We looked at the MacuHealth, and you said it was MacuShield in Europe. It was actually, it's now, I think it's called MacuPrime in Europe. It's not MacuShield anymore. The studies that we tested were MacuPrimes, which is basically the European version of MacuHealth. And
so now it's called MacuPrime.
It's called MacuPrime in Europe.
Okay, now no longer MacuShield. That's good to know.
Yeah, it's called MacuPrime.
We have listeners in Europe that watch. So
okay, yeah, sorry, I'm glad I got to confirm that. And this means that what I'm saying is that the source material that we've used, which comes from Industria Organica, the Mexican organization, which MacuHealth exclusively use, that we picked the 10-10-2 formula for our experiment. So we spoke at the beginning of the podcast about independent research, quality of research. And I said, state of the art, you know, doing all this is important. We believed at this point that the state of the art intervention was the MacuHealth / MacuPrime intervention, because we had stability data, because we had enough exploratory data, single blind trial that led up to this. And all of this basically, and all the most trials, the mesozeaxanthin trials and the central dip work, informed an idea that we could write a grant proposal, Kerry, and go to one of the most prestigious funding bodies in Europe, which was the European Research Council. And we went there, and in the grant proposal basically summarized everything we've been talking about tonight in a logical way that was understandable. And I said to the government, we've identified a nutrient deficiency related to mesozeaxanthin that is a value add when you supplement with 3 carotenoids that will achieve 2 things. We will enhance visual function for general population today in real time, and we will reduce the risk of the world's leading cause of blindness, age-related macular degeneration. So that was my claim. That was my hypothesis.
And what did we find from CREST?
And what we found from CREST was exactly that. We ran it in a healthy population who had free of retinal disease. We changed one thing. We gave them MacuHealth. Our primary outcome measure, pre-published, was contrast sensitivity. We enhanced it greatly. So we achieved a primary outcome measure in the general population. We're now publishing the second paper from that, which is going to show in the coming months the clinical impact, what that means beyond the statistical impact, which we spoke about. So why it's so clinically valuable to your patients and your listeners' patients to do that. So we achieved our primary outcome, and we did so in the context of a placebo-controlled trial, where everything was fair, where the measurements, where the sample was identical, 50-50. We tested them all the same over the same period of time, placebo intervention, and we achieved our primary outcome measure. In the AMD population, we looked at early stage AMD, AREDS 1 through 8. So they didn't have that end stage where they needed injections. They had changes, drusen pigments in their retina, which were clear, which were obvious, troublesome. They were starting to lose their visual functions. And what we did in that experiment was when we did a head-to-head trial, we had the triple carotenoid versus a lutein zeaxanthin only. And when we looked at the primary outcome measure, we saw that the triple carotenoid had, in terms of contrast sensitivity, significantly more benefit in terms of that clinically meaningful effect. So in a disease where people normally lose their vision, Kerry, they really lose their vision, and in a quick period of time, we've given them better vision. And in my view, this experiment alone should result with governments and eye care and anyone who can, industry, foundations, whoever can, make these interventions available to this population at the very least. Because these people are we don't need to do genetic tests or anything like that. They have the disease. We need to give them the intervention that the CREST trial put itself out there, was conducted, and which demonstrated efficacy of the MacuHealth intervention. And this is why, Kerry, as you can see it in my body maybe at this stage, I'm so passionate about this, because we put everything we had into this. And this is why I will protect against there's been other brilliant studies that have come along, and, you know, studies that have looked at vision and visual functions and, you know, added to our knowledge, and will continue to add to our knowledge. Absolutely, we welcome that. But we have to be careful that experiments that are poorly designed, that do not have the appropriate intervention, that do not have the appropriate measurements, and if the data says something, that we accept that. So CREST for me, you know, really ask the question and answer the question that should change eye care today and into the future.
MacuHealth, your science-born and tested solutions for visual performance, macular degeneration, and dry eye syndrome. New products coming soon. Embrace the science.
This study, along with the low macular pigment study that you did, are game-changing studies I use every day in my office. But let's explain what it found. It increased contrast sensitivity. It increased macular pigment. It also increased visual function. Explain what contrast sensitivity is. I know it's getting late, but, and what visual function parts it helped, and how it decreased the progression of macular degeneration. Because this is too important to gloss over.
No, absolutely. And I'm going to get a pen, and I'm going to get a piece of paper here. Well, maybe I'll just explain it. So, you know, every optometrist would be familiar, of course, with the classic contrast sensitivity curve, right? So you think it peaks at the central. So you know what cycles per degree are. So basically different spatial frequencies, different size targets. So different spatial frequencies along our x-axis. And then you have basically your curve which changes, by the way, with disease and our age. As we get older, that drops. Our curve drops, Kerry. So that means we lose our vision. We lose our contrast sensitivity. That's why elderly population have issues with falling, for example. It's these measures of vision. And I want to tell you, and I want to tell your listeners about Osley and Sloan and a paper, I forget the exact year, but they demonstrated very clearly that the predictor of visual function is contrast sensitivity. So someone that has, and not acuity, by the way. So if you think of your curve again, when we measure acuities, which is what a classic optometrist does all day long, you're only dealing with about 9% of the spatial visual world. So you're missing everything else. But if you look at contrast sensitivity, and let's say look at 6 cycles per degree, which is this low spatial frequency, okay? We know that this is predictive of the entirety of the vision. It's a massive predictor of total vision, whether you have disease or not. So if you have a healthy patient, let's just look at a case example. A patient comes into you and they sit in your chair, Carrie, and they go, "Doctor, I'm not happy. I'm really just not happy with my vision." And you check their cataract and you go, "Oh, your cataract's okay. Your acuities are doing good. Maybe come back in 2 years." You're letting that patient out of the chair unhappy. If you measure their contrast sensitivity, you will see firsthand their problem. Okay. And we see this in cataract. If I measure acuities versus contrast in patients with cataract, acuities will correlate quite well. Contrast sensitivity is really strongly correlated with severity of cataract, and hence subjective feeling about this. You do the surgery, we're going to change cataract, we're going to fix the problem. Their acuities will get better, but their contrast will correlate brilliantly well with how they feel. Now, within that, then we've challenges, of course, of glare and halos, which are not always perfect when we do that surgery, or when cataract surgeons do that surgery. So optimizing the filtration, again, with macular pigment is really, really valuable. But back to CREST, the logic here was that could we take a measure of visual function that we know to be relevant to visual and contrast, and that's our primary outcome measure was 6 cycles per degree. And what we show in our new work is that it's a massive predictor of how the patient feels. And remarkably, Carrie, everyone that took MacuHealth demonstrated an improvement in their visual function and contrast sensitivity in the healthy population in a clinically meaningful way, and in the patients with AMD in a very significant way also. So I can't overemphasize, you know, what I believe. And again, we spoke about ARIDS today. ARIDS looked at disease. We looked at people with the disease, and we looked at the different functions. We looked at what matters. We looked at why they're unhappy, what this disease is going to do to them. And we looked at how we can change that with carotenoid intervention.
And that goes into the other study that you did with that are free of disease. And I think you covered that pretty well.
We kind of covered that nicely now already.
Yeah, you covered that beautifully. So let's talk about, and then you talked about before about imaging lutein and zeaxanthin.
Yeah.
So you covered
so ultimately, that's a validation. Paul's work, where we really nicely with his imaging and this with Raman, shows that actually, have a look at that paper, Kerry, have a look at the images in that paper, and you'll see the zeaxanthin, Raman result, which is really where it's concentrated. So there's a necessity for us to do something here to provide these carotenoids.
And our final study is the bioavailability study. This is a new breakthrough. If you could explain that.
Yeah, it's a good place to end, because efficiency around, we've spoke about safety, we spoke about quality, we spoke about stability and efficacy, and that is working. So, and I told you for the future, we're looking at different applications of carotenoids. We're looking at lowering inflammation, and we continue our work on brain. But what this new technology does, or new science does, is we know, as I'm in biochemist primarily, right? So I really understand the biochemistry of the carotenoids. I understand the challenges that we have. So when you consume a carotenoid, whether it's in food or whether it's in a supplement, you're putting something that's fat soluble into a water-based system. So the stomach is, so it doesn't like it. So the biology of bioavailability and absorption requires that. That's why we say, make sure when you're taking this carotenoids, you have them with a meal. And the reason why we say that is you want to have certain fats provided. Because what you want to do is you want to be able to package these carotenoids in a way that they can go through the intestinal wall, they're captured, taken through the intestinal wall, made available in the lymph system and into the blood system, which is then transport via the carrier proteins to the target tissues, where they cross the barrier to the brain and the retina, the blood-brain barrier. So what have I said? I said we have to eat a carotenoid that's fat soluble, that doesn't like the water system. The first challenge is that even if you purify it beautifully, which is so you take the carotenoid out of the plant, Kerry, and if you think of a carotenoid as John Nolan for a second, a human, and my main piece here is the carotenoid, the basic chemical molecule. And I have these esters joined. So we call these palmitates. And these palmitates in the plant keep the carotenoid stable. So it stops them being damaged by light and stops them from oxidizing. But when you purify them, they will line up like soldiers in an army, and they will form a crystal. And if they form a crystal when they're in the stomach, it's going to be very difficult for the capture, for them to go through the intestine. SRB1 has to capture them and take them on their journey. So basically having too much of it, and it'll pass through its system, and it won't come in your urine because they're fat soluble. It'll be in a stool sample, in feces. So we're probably wasting a lot of carotenoid that we consume if we do it in the normal way. So what we were able to do, Kerry, was we were able to purify it in a way which is classic from all type of extraction, but allow the acetates. So instead of having the big esters, allow small, just we call these acetates. It's basically vinegar, and it keeps the carotenoid soluble. So instead of them joining up like this army situation, they're now soluble. Like when you put a vitamin C capsule into water, it'll go into the water. So now we have something that's more bioavailable in the first. It's still stable because it has the acetates. And the other element to this is that it has in our stomach we produce these bile and surfactants. And what these do, Kerry, is they form like a little special transporter package that wraps itself around the carotenoid to help it go on its journey, because otherwise it won't. And so this, the micellar, which are all things that are natural in our system, you're optimizing those as part of the formula as well. So we've made it more soluble, we've made it more bioavailable by adding the micelles. And now, that was the theory, okay? So then we tested it, and we ran 6 different interventions. And the 6 interventions that we used, we had the classic Macu Health. We had a Macu Health with Omega. We had, I'm trying to think of them all, there were 6 in total. We split the capsule into 2 because we wanted to see if there's a benefit of having, instead of having 10, 10, 2 in one, that you've split it, you know. And we ran the experiment and the results were absolutely staggering. You know, we did well with all the interventions, similar to what we did in CREST and most of these other experiments. Like we were able to replicate that, Carrie, but the changes that we saw in blood in the coast, it's the, and Marina Green, Dr. Marina Green she did her PhD on this entire project. We were able to enhance the amount of not lutein, interestingly, but zeaxanthin and mesozeaxanthin, you know, by an enormous amount in the blood. And what this means is we found a way to, because even within the very good experiments that we've done, Kerry, up to now, you have different rates of response. Some people do really well, some people do not so well. Now we have a way that we can give better value of carotenoid absorption. And particularly for, as I said, the results were clear for zeaxanthin and mesozeaxanthin. And, you know, we ran this for 6 months. Again, the macular pigment was greater in those as well. All measures compared to placebo were significantly better. But it's, I'd say, in terms of like a wow moment in my science that I've been working with, I really appreciate you representing the risk factor paper, the AMD paper that we did. Thank you for that. But I think in terms of like bringing something beyond CREST, which is the gold standard, I think being able to enhance bioavailability of what we know to be very good is something that's truly fascinating.
Well,
so
it's not what you eat, it's what you absorb. And if you look at a totality of the research, you know, eating foods with lutein, zeaxanthin, taking pills with lutein, zeaxanthin, mesozeaxanthin, getting it into the serum, you could see that you could decrease the risk of AMD from 43% up to as high as 93%. And a lot of that is what you could absorb. Can you absorb this? Can you get it into your blood? Can you get it to your macular to protect it? Nature's putting that pigment there for a reason. With all the stressors that we have, the way the standard American diet, all the exposures we have, we're doing a very good job of lowering that macular pigment. So we have to concentrate on replacing it because it's there for all the reasons that you've just spoken about. So we need to absorb it.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, I kind of feel a little guilty from some, as you're talking there, I'm thinking about Joanna Seddon's work, all these brilliant, excellent piece of science from these wonderful people that have, so there's so much information out there. You could never, but I was very biased towards kind of, I suppose, the macular pigment piece and the carotenoids and our primary research question. And I think your listeners, I mean, we led the discussion tonight by talking in some difficult stuff, okay? Quality of evidence, levels of evidence, statistics, p-values, confidence intervals. What do these all mean? I would still say to your listeners to have trust in the peer-reviewed system, understand the totality of the evidence. I think that was a message that comes. And
I would love to have you back and we could do 10 other studies. I think that would be awesome. But I know it's very late. What time is it in Ireland where you are?
It's now it's now 9:29 and I haven't had my dinner yet.
Okay, well, I want to thank Dr. John Nolan for joining me today. This is a course we just gave on macular carotenoids. This is something that could be used for the optometry students and optometrists themselves and ophthalmologists. We really gave them a course, and we're going to split this into a number of different episodes. So I want to thank Dr. John Nolan. If people want to get in touch with you and they want to learn more about your work, how can they do that?
So that's no problem. I have a website, and by the way, everything I spoke about tonight, all the papers, we have 116 odd papers now, and they're on my website, profjohnnolan.com. And my email and everything is there. You can contact me if you have any. And all those papers are open access, which means they're available for free download. I think that's something that should happen. in science when, you know, taxpayers essentially pay for good research, and we need to make that information available. So we always make, at our organization, make it possible for that to be the case. So all those papers, peer-reviewed papers, are there. And there's some very nice information there on, and videos. We made reference to some of the documentaries and you know, I want to congratulate you as well, Carrie, for your own journey with your Open Your Eyes and your documentary, which is excellent. So very happy to kind of co-promote that for you. I know it was a massive commitment for you, and you gave it everything. So congratulations.
Well, I appreciate that. And you are one of the heroes in vision science, and you've taught us so much. Over 150 studies that you've done. And, you know, these are studies that we have to get out to the vision community so we can help our patients and not wait the 17 years that the average study takes to get into, that gets to the doctors, to get to the vision, to get to the patients. So I want to thank you for being one of our heroes. And this is Dr. Kerry Gell for Open Your Eyes. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, stay well.
Your eyes and your vision are under attack. Damaging blue light from the sun, your phone, your computer, your tablet, even light bulbs and car headlights is constantly bombarding you. The good news is our eyes actually already have a line of defense to counter the effects of blue light. This defense is made up of 3 pigments called carotenoids. MacuHealth with Micromycel, the only supplement with the exclusive patent on all 3 macular carotenoids and Micromycel technology.
OIE Broadcasting is the emerging leader in social media. We use scientific entertainment to drive more patients into your office. Visit oiebroadcasting.com and sign up today.
Fitting multifocal contact lenses presents a big opportunity to meet patient needs while growing your practice. Alcon is your partner not only with our innovative portfolio, but through e-learning. Learn to enhance your multifocal strategy today with the Alcon Experience Academy.
Each generation was supposed to be healthier than the last one. Lifespan was supposed to be increasing. We were supposed to be in this paradise by now. Instead of getting healthier and healthier, it seems to have gone the opposite way.
Millennials were projected to be the first generation in history to not outlive the generation before them.
We are certainly headed for disaster.
I think a lot of people are beginning to question the whole story.
We live in a time where the paradigms are shifting.
And the optometrist, in my opinion, is one of the best kept secrets.
The public doesn't realize about going to the eye doctor. So many different diseases actually manifest in the eye. The back of the eye is the only place in the body that you could actually see the blood vessels.
Completely non-invasively, you could screen thousands of people, not just for their eye health, but for their whole body health.
Because this disease is here, it's also going to be here.
And I can look into the back of my eyeball, and there are expert doctors on the ground who are looking at my eyeball while I'm doing it.
The eye is the canary of the mind.
The eye is the kingdom.
Will everyone please open their eyes?
Since I bought Safe For You, my dad makes me clean his boat.
Es natural y es un buen producto.
Every time I go back to school, my mom always makes sure that I have my Safe For You products. I bring extra, and my roommates certainly don't mind.
It's a good thing I had Safe For You to clean up after this little guy.
When my hands get dry, I like to wash them with Safe For You.
And most importantly, the reason why I buy Safe For You is because it's safe for me and you.